Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back, and as Michael Duca would say, we're at the yard at the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. He is indeed at the yard. Jerry Feitelberg is where? Where the hell are you, Jerry?
I am down the peninsula in beautiful Atherton, California at the moment.
Okay, I'm in Alameda, California. I'm Ralph Tycho. It's the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I've got two experts from the press box, from the Bay Area press box. This is a real weird season, so Jerry doesn't get to go to the press box, if I'm not mistaken. But Michael does. Tell us what's going on in the 2020 baseball season, and I put that in quotes. This is really not a season as we know it. What's going on, Michael Duca?
Well, the ball is flying. I mean, there are guys out there approaching a dozen home runs 21 games into the season, 22 games into the season. And there's just no way to deny that the heat that's going all around the country, the fact that players are fresh at the start of the quote-unquote season in July, when there's heat, it is just, I mean, even here at Oracle, for public health reasons, they closed off the 4 archways in right field that allowed the public outside the ballpark to, kind of peer in like a knothole gang. And by doing that, they changed the entire character of this ballpark. It was the only park in Major League history that had ground level wind. The wind would come off the water, convection wind. Anybody who's flown a kite at the seashore knows what I'm talking about.
Right.
And that wind would funnel its way through those narrow archways in the right field wall, and they effectively pushed all of the prevailing wind to the left and made it nearly impossible to hit balls out in right field. Well, we've had either 2 or 3 right-handed hitters go deep to right field already this year in about 10 games at this ballpark. And a typical season has 1 or 2. So stats are just all over the place this year, and it's really hard to get a grip on much of anything. The guy with the highest WAR in all of baseball is Mike Yastrzemski.
Yeah, right.
There are I've seen like 8 lineups in the last week and a half here, and there've got to be a dozen guys starting games on a regular basis who are on the interstate still. Guys who have not even broken 200 in batting average. It's just a bizarre season from start to finish. And then you get all these teams that are using openers, and, it's going to be an interesting year when you look back on how you decide who gets a Cy Young Award. The Cy Young Award might well go to a guy whose manager lets him pitch a third time through the lineup.
Well, wins didn't come into consideration when DeGrom won his Cy Young Award. So maybe they're looking at, maybe baseball's looking beyond just the traditional way of determining who's the best pitcher.
Well,
yeah,
Ralph,
I suppose it's... Go ahead.
Well, in the old days, they used to go by wins and losses. Now pitchers, if they're lucky to go 6 innings, it depends on the bullpen. Pitchers lead the game with a lead, but the bullpen doesn't hold it, but the starting pitcher's done his job. So they look at that, look at his performance overall. And guys are going to win. What did DeGrom have, 12 wins or 10 wins in the season, and he won the Cy Young. But they looked at his performance and looked what he did while he was pitching. And it's not his fault that the bullpen didn't save the game for them. It was, the Mets bullpen wasn't doing their job. And it's just everything now is based on analytics.
To put that in perspective, Jerry, with the reduction in the size of the schedule, that means that this year's Cy Young Award winner might go 4-1.
Yeah, something like that. You made a point when you first started, Michael. Usually this time of year, starting pitchers have trouble raising their arm over their shoulder to comb their hair. They're so tired. And here we are. The A's have played 27 games, or 20, something like that. In 3 or 4 games, half the season will be over. We're starting the second half of the season next week. It's totally bizarre. Totally bizarre.
Absolutely. When you think about it, you just multiply by 4 what the statistics would be. So if a guy has 12 home runs, he's going to finish with 48 home runs in your head. Am I correct?
Something like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, what you multiply by depends on where you are in the season. But each game is worth 2.7 games in a normal season. So as somebody very cleverly posted the other night, Kenta Maeda is 3 outs away from 2.7 no-hitters.
Well, it's still strange, too, because the Cardinals haven't played very many games. The Marlins lost some games. How are they going to on the schedule?
They're going to play front to back to back to front to front to back double headers is what they're going to do.
Yeah, I guess so. Something like that. Unbelievable.
Right, and be sure to make the double headers 7 innings because far be it if you stay at the ballpark too long. You may have too much fun, and start the runner off at second base. That's my question to you, Mr. Official Scorer. How are they going to handle that in the record books?
Oh, it's actually pretty simple. It's actually pretty simple, and it's leading towards, and it's probably the last block knocked out of the wall of something that I personally would not be happy to see happen. But, if Major League Baseball institutes it, I will certainly execute it, and that is the team error. In essence, what they're doing in extra innings now is they're placing a runner on second base and saying he reached there on an error committed by no one.
Yeah. Well, didn't something unusual happen the other night where the leadoff hitter had a sac fly? The runner started at second, went to third on a wild pitch, and scored on a sac fly.
Okay.
Yeah, there was something like that. I know the Giants lost a game, one of those horrendous A's games. They wound up when they gave up 5 in the 9th to tie it. 3 of those guys never swung the bat. And then in the 10th inning, they lost it on a placed runner, a ground out, and a fly out. So the A's got half of their runs in the game and 4 of their 6 runs at the end of the game without anybody actually putting the ball in play or swinging a bat or getting a hit.
Wow.
Just strange.
Okay, Michael, one more question about the rule. Who gets the run scored if there is one?
Well, whoever scores the run.
The pinch runner is credited with...
He's not a pinch runner. He's put into the box and the scorer's report as a placed runner. He's placed on second base, and that runner is whoever made the last out of the inning. And to clarify that, if you've got a runner on first and somebody hits a double, and the runner tries to score and is thrown out at the plate, as has happened this year in extra innings,
right?
It's not the guy who gets thrown out at the plate who's placed at second base. It's the guy who hit the double.
Okay. All right. How about the ribby? Who gets that?
Whoever drives him in. I mean, nothing changes in the scoring with the exception of the fact that the very first runner of the inning is unearned. They decided not to hang the pitcher with that first run if he had to come into the game starting an inning with a runner on second.
Okay, so it's an under.
Wow.
Okay, got it.
That makes it much more palatable to me, a traditionalist, because I've always said they've bastardized our game enough, and I will. Pardon me?
They have done it. They have done that, Ralph. But I got to be honest with you. I didn't. I can't say I was a fan of this idea when I first heard it. But as it's played out, it might be the most entertaining part of games this year, because it is just astonishing the wildly divergent ways that teams have found to squander a 90% chance to score in extra innings.
Yes, if you look at it and you're rooting for ineptitude, then you got your game.
I worked a game remotely earlier this year that went 12 innings. I mean, that's 5 opportunities to score with a runner on second and nobody out, which is like an 88% chance of scoring. That's 5 opportunities in a row that 2 teams managed to piddle away.
Michael, how is it to work a game remotely, and what you set it up on your personal television, or tell me how that goes.
It looks a little bit like the Space Center. I have so many monitors going, Ralph. I have a 43-inch television on my desk, approximately 2 feet from my eyes. In front of that, I have a Mac laptop, which I am using to put video on that monitor as a secondary desktop on the Mac. I also have a page open where I communicate via Slack with the stringer and the PR staffs and all of the MLB people who are both in the ballpark and managing the game remotely. Additionally, I usually have an iPad open, I have a second laptop open, and I have my phone available to do video also.
Wow.
Okay. I'm going to have a hard time constructing this question, but it comes from a conversation I had with Tally the other day. I told her that when all of this changes, when we get through the pandemic and life is back to some sort of normality, it will never be anywhere near the same as it is now, but some of it will be for the better. Now, is there anything coming out of this? And by the way, now that you've explained the extra inning thing to me, I will look at things a little differently, and I will, for one, stop shutting off the radio when it's an extra inning game. So, but what will come out of this, and I'll ask you first, Jerry, I want to hear your voice, what will come out of this as a society that's better? Doesn't have to be just baseball. Our lives are more than just that. But it could be just baseball. What will come out of it for the good? What will society reap from all of this horror?
Well, you bring up good questions. Hopefully, what will come out is that we will have a greater appreciation of science. We have a better appreciation of what the doctors tell us to do, and that we understand that nature is biology, chemistry, and physics, and that you can't, no matter what you do or what you want to do or what people are telling you to do, the virus is going to do what it does, and the way for people to stay healthy is to pay attention to what they're doing. And we're going to be wearing masks for a long period of time. and we're going to be practicing social distancing. If we think we can go back to the way life was before the pandemic, we're mistaken. And you put your life going to gatherings where there are lots of people. So our lives are going to be different in the future. And if we want to stay healthy, we have to respect what the virus can do, and we have to respect the elderly. We have to respect the children, and we have to take care of our health. That's all I can say. As for the game of baseball, I think next year, assuming that the virus is gone, spring training starts in February, and a lot of people are saying that this thing isn't going to be gone real soon. That was 6 months before they start spring training again. So we may have an altered season next year. And what will we see next year? We might see the universal DH next year. We might see stadiums with maybe 20% capacity, depending on how things go with the virus. Life is going to be different, and I don't know. I'm watching baseball. Some of the things, the fact that the relief pitcher has to go face three batters sometimes confounds me, because I've seen guys come in and they can't get anybody out for the first three hitters. And the manager wants to get them out. Managers can't use their strategies, lefty on lefty, that type of thing. So that kind of bothers me. But I don't know. We're going to have 7-inning doubleheaders. We're going to have the universal DH. We're going to have all these rules changes, or are we going to go back to the way it was?
How about the divisions, Michael Duca?
Well, which divisions are you talking about? The ones in society or the ones in Major League Baseball?
Couldn't begin to cover the depth of that question. We don't have enough podcast air, and that's saying something.
To say we don't have enough bandwidth when we have unlimited bandwidth begins to speak to the depth of the problem.
Right. Well said.
I'm going to take a typical political tactic of today and answer the question I want to answer instead of the question you actually asked me. Because I want to answer the question that Jerry answered. And I think a number of things are going to change as a result of this. I think that it's going to become almost impossible for people to continue prosecuting their lives as though they were alone on the planet. And what I mean by that is, typically just think about the last time you tried to change lanes on a busy freeway. With fewer people on the road now, with more what I would call, I think one of the positive outcomes from this is just going to be mindfulness. And I think with more mindfulness of others and their existence and their influence on us, we also become a little bit more mindful of how to be more polite as a society. One of the things that is truly interesting to me when you look at the worldwide statistics on this pandemic is how many nations have managed to control it that are nations that have reputation for thoughtfulness and politeness. Japan, Thailand, Canada, New Zealand. There's all over the world. I mean, there's nothing geographic about it, but somehow nations that have cemented into their societal fabric the notion of thinking of others have done a much better job with this. Yeah. And I think that that's one of the lessons we will take away. Another thing that I think we will take away is a fundamental change in the way work is done in this country, and that's going to lead to a fundamental change in how cities are constructed and how child care is provided. I mean, there's going to be, I think, large societal changes that come out of this, and they're going to be changes that people have advocated for 30 or 40 years, but that were always thought to be too radical, too crazy, too far out, too left, too whatever. but they're going to be necessary in order to get us back on our feet. And I do think we will get back on our feet. And I just, before I subscribe to the notion that things will never go back to the way they were, I remind you that it was a hell of a lot worse in 1917, and things were back to the way they were for the Roaring '20s.
Very good points. Very good points. Hey, if you guys will indulge me, you may know or may not know that I am writing a book of my own. It is called Mary Jane is My Mistress. Mary Jane is my girlfriend. Baseball is my mistress. And it's a memoir, and it starts in 1951, my first year as a fan. My grandfather took me to all those games at 3 different stadiums. I was 4.5 years old, and he impressed upon me Willie Mays' talents. So if you guys would, and I will include it in the book, you will get credit for it, of course. Give me some of your impressions of Willie Mays that the average baseball fan is unaware of. And we've talked about him in the past, but this is your all-star team of Willie Mays' memories. Start with you, Mr. Duca.
Well, I spent a chunk of my childhood, from basically the beginning of 7th grade through college, in Southern California. So my contact with my favorite team was via Vin Scully. And Vin Scully had a particular sobriquet that he placed upon Willie. He would just say, and Ortega is behind to Davenport, and on deck is that man Mays. And within those 3 words and that specific phrasing and intonation, you could feel a sense of dread.
I was going to say doom, the way it sounded in your voice. You knew something bad was coming.
Well, yeah, you did. It was, and it was interesting because Willie always hit Don Drysdale well, but not as well as Willie McCovey did. And it was always I always got a kick out of how Willie would get into the box and dig in, and then look out and remember that he was facing Drysdale and back out and cover up the hole. Yeah, Willie would tell you, I'm too smart to get hit.
Jerry, you're an out-of-towner. You didn't grow up in New York. You didn't grow up in San Francisco. But you did see Willie later in his career in California. What did you get from Willie Mays?
Well, I got to see Willie play in the 2 World Series in 1951 and 1954. The Giants lost to the Yankees in '51 and to the Indians in 1954.
Well, they beat the Indians handedly.
They swept the Indians.
Right. They swept one of the last. They swept one of the very few teams to ever have 4 20-game winners in the rotation.
Yeah, the Indians won 111 games that year, and they were heavily favored in the World Series. And in my brain, and I saw it on TV, was the catch at the Polo Grounds, where Vic Wertz hit the ball 485 feet, and Willie Mays caught it and then threw back. That was probably the greatest play that I've seen in the outfield. And everything he did, he made it look easy. He just was a great player. And he had to play in Candlestick when they had when the winds were coming in, and he still hit 660 home runs. He probably would have hit over 700 if he played in another ballpark where they didn't have the awful weather. So
if he had played in Hank Aaron's ballpark, he'd have hit 800.
Oh yeah, no question about it. And now at Atlanta, where the ball was going out of the park, he'd jump off the bat.
Or even Milwaukee, where Willie hit 4 in one day.
Yeah, or if he played in St. Louis or all those towns, but he had to play in San Francisco where the weather was crappy, and he still hit 660 home runs. And he was the ultimate 5-tool player. He could do it all. And if you measure all the players, he's number one. And there have been 5-tool players, but Willie's at the top of the list. And anyone that got to see him play regularly got a treat. Right, Ralph? You got to see him. So anyway, that's my memory of Willie Mays.
Beautiful.
Question for you, Jerry. Jerry, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
What do you remember about the catch after he caught the ball?
Well, he turned and threw, and his hat flew off his head, as it always does.
I remember Al Rosen scooting back out of scoring position, and he kept the double play in order. What do you remember, Michael?
He definitely did, and then one of my all-time favorite quotes in baseball history. The relief pitcher who threw that pitch to Vic Wertz was Don Little. He was one of the first left-handed specialists.
Yes.
And he threw a pitch. Don Little hit it 483 feet, I believe, was the actual measured distance.
Vic Wertz hit it.
Willie made the catch, hit a brilliant throw back to the infield, nearly doubled up the runner, and Little was taken out of the game, walked into the dugout, tossed his glove in the corner, and said, "Well, I got my man."
Ralph, I have to tell you, I was thinking about you the other night when Michelle Obama was giving her speech. You know, she would say, if they go low, we go high. And I said, yes, and Ralph goes even higher. But that's another story.
I glow at that, believe me, because part of my book, How I Became a 420 Activist, is that I got to know Ferris Fain before he was busted. And
up in Sonoma, was it?
It was north of Sacramento, but I can't tell you where, but I was living in Sacramento at the time, and Sacramento is a hot blood. Michael, you know that. You remember for baseball. And
I grew up there.
Oh, then, wow, you know. They had in Sacramento a baseball banquet every 2 weeks. They had the American Legion banquets. They had every school, every division had banquets, and they'd bring in players with Sacramento backgrounds. And Ferris Fain would come in, and I happen to know that he was a grower, and I myself was an indulger. And he and I, before his little Cub Scout speeches or this times, have a doobie, share a hit or two. And he'd smile and remember me. And one day he got busted, and he was going to go to jail. And he was doing no more than what I was doing.
Yeah,
Too big grower. If it were Texas, I could have spent the rest of my life if I were caught. And there started my unselfishness, where I realized it's a team sport. you got to do good for society. And I think I contributed to the changes of the law in my own little way, and I was an activist and a participant, and I helped keep the community together. And my book is going to talk about that, and it's going to talk about the good things of cannabis and the misconceptions, and how the movie Reefer Madness led to my mother overreacting and going to see Lou Gehrig play baseball, or Lou Gehrig give the final speech one day, the greatest day of my life. She was there because of cannabis.
No
so
kidding.
It's going to be an interesting book. I was the TOPS representative for 15 years, and as you guys know, you're part of the greatest podcast baseball network in existence. So I have some stories to tell, and I look forward to it. I'm doing it with George Grimm. It's an As Told To book where I ramble on and he makes it sing. And we're on the right track. I know that because I make him smile and he stays interested. He's interesting as well. So, yes.
Ralph, you brought up Ferris Fain, and maybe a lot of the younger people don't know about Ferris Fain. He was a two-time batting champion in the American League at the same time, around in the late 40s, same time as competing with Ted Williams for the crown. I believe he grew up in Oakland, and I did an interview with a guy by the name of Ray Malgrady a few years ago. Malgrady was a minor league player, managed in the Baltimore Orioles minor league system, through batting practice for the Giants, owned a bar in San Leandro. Ray and his mother were evicted in Oakland in his apartment, and Ferris Fain and his family moved into that apartment when Ray was a kid. And the only reason that Ferris Fain is not in the Hall of Fame is that you have to play 10 years in the big leagues, and I think he only had 9 seasons in due to World War II. So a little background on Ferris Fain.
That is correct. Ferris Fain actually has the 12th highest on base average in Major League history.
Wow, that's phenomenal. Phenomenal. And he was a good fielder too. First baseman, good fielder.
Mm-hmm. I'll give you a little tease to my book. I talk about cannabis users. Ferris Fain is one. Tug McGraw's another. There's a pitcher, Bill Lee, that I talk about. And then, if you're a Sacramento kid, Michael, you may remember a fellow by the name of Sammy Lovelace. Sammy Lovelace came up in the minors with Manny Trio in the A's organization out of Sacramento. And Sammy Lovelace in winter ball in Mexico brought back in the 80s a pound of marijuana. They called it that then. It's now an antiquated word, but a pound of cannabis. And he was caught, and his baseball career was ended. He was on the up. He was a terrific fielder. He was a terrific human being. He had a young wife with twins. He'd take them to Renfree Field, and he was just a good kid who got caught up and banned from baseball over cannabis. And this was the 80s, the 1980s. So our lives have changed, and but for for Sammy, he ended up on the skids, and it wasn't a happy ending to his brief life on Earth.
Well, as I'm sure you know, Ralph, the reality of it is that cannabis was renamed marijuana to make it sound more dangerous. And it was in the 1930s, and basically all of the campaign for 70 years against cannabis was racially motivated.
Absolutely.
It was because it was black and brown people who used the herb, and that's just kind of how it's gotten stuck into our consciousness as being dangerous, as being a criminal activity, et cetera, But the reality of it is that it was yet another form of institutionalized racism.
And it didn't go away in all the years of Prohibition. It was used medically, and it was basically the foundation of a lot of painkillers. A lot of people got relief mentally and physically through cannabis, as they do today. But when it became prohibitive, people like my grandfather would scour the city for underground cannabis and take it back clandestinely, and didn't want his daughter involved in it. There was a lot of hypocrisy that started in those years that ended up in these years. So,
therapeutically, Ralph, as you know, medical marijuana has value for people with glaucoma, people who have multiple sclerosis, people who have cancer.
Excuse me, everybody. You're listening to Jerry Feitelberg, California Pharmacist of the Year, the whole frickin' year in the whole state of California in 1995. Jerry ran a store in Alameda for years and years, started in L.A., so this is the voice of knowledge along those subjects, and Michael Duca is the voice of knowledge on all subjects. So,
well,
how about that?
A drugstore.
The thing in California is that several years ago, legislation was passed to allow people to get it if they had a card, a medical marijuana card, and then a few years ago it expanded and made it legal everywhere. And so now it's not a problem. However, there are still problems federally with marijuana. Cannabis is still classified as a Schedule I drug, which federal law does not allow it to be used. Fortunately for the people that are using it, no one is going to court to try and impose the supremacy court, which says if laws are in conflict, the federal law takes precedent. So fortunately for the politicians, the lobbyists, for the liquor companies, for the cotton companies, for every company, for the timber companies, they all put out the money and keep it from happening. Interesting that there's only one of the candidates for the Democratic presidency that wasn't for legalization, and his name was Joe Biden, who takes a lot of money from the pharmaceuticals. So we've been set back as a society for years and years by all of this, and not to say that Joe Biden shouldn't be and must be elected president, but it ain't all that great. So that's just the way it is. I mean, we have an opioid crisis in this country that's killing 70 or 80,000 people a year, and we still have our heads in the sand. We still criminalize the use of opioids. I proposed many years ago that we have a pilot program, set up a clinic and have the people who are addicted treated by physicians so that they don't have to go out on the street and they don't have to buy the drugs on the illegal black market, and they don't overdose. They get treated for their illness, for their sickness, and they can get them off the drugs. Right now, you're finding people, they're scraping people off the ground, and you have another element. You got this super potent fentanyl coming in from other countries, and they're mixing it in with the heroin, and people are dying from overdoses from these things. And we have our eyes closed. We're not paying attention. We have a serious problem, and we're not treating it. Hopefully, they should be treated as a medical issue rather than a criminal issue. And it's the same thing that you had with cannabis. It was treated as a criminal issue, and it's not. It's a health issue, and we're not doing anything about it. Hopefully, with the change of administrations in January, we can do something about it. I'm not holding my breath, but at least I think people will be listening to.
At this point, there are bigger fish to fry, presumably. Yeah. But I had the thought that if you vented cannabis into every government building in the country, we'd all be better off. But that's another story for another podcast. Thank you for your wonderful recollections of Willie. And I love talking to you guys. It's terrific. Michael Duca and Jerry Feitelberg. Enjoy your game tonight, Michael.
Thank you, Ralph.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Be healthy.
We'll talk again. Maybe
very
soon.
Soon.
More baseball. Yep,
absolutely. Very soon. I enjoy talking life too.
And someday, Ralph, we're going to be up at Nation's Burgers and having our burger and fries, the three of us. Maybe Nancy Finley will come join us. We'll have a nice round table at the restaurant if they ever open up again.
And maybe Michael Duca will join us again. That would be nice too.
Yeah, of course.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Be well, my friends.
All right, take care, guys.
Take care.
Thank you for listening, everybody. I'm Ralph Tycho. It's the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Happy trails.